All right. It's go time. It's show time. What an absolute thrill to be here in a really modern kind of event, isn't it? This is a sign of the times. It's 2021. We're sitting in a boardroom in Perth. Wilson is by my side. My name is Carmen Braidwood and I will be your host today. I'm going to introduce to you Wilson and Changing the Game, which we are here to launch in more detail very, very soon. First, though, I'd like to take care of a few formalities to get us underway by, of course, acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet here in Perth. You might be watching from anywhere right around the world right now, but here in Perth, the traditional custodians of this land are the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, changing the game, let me tell you about this fascinating new platform that we're here to celebrate today and launch. It's all about connecting amazing people whose stories show why diversity is good for business and how innovation can impact our world. In season one, Wilson, who's right here next to me, do say hi, Wilson. Don't feel like you can't speak during
Hello,
this
everyone.
process. Great to have you here. Wilson is focusing in on gender equality and equity and speaking to incredible women who've changed the game in their own careers and are bringing along others for the ride. I'm going to chat to Wilson shortly, as I keep teasing. We're going to find out more about the Changing the Game program, what inspired him, and how you can get involved, especially if you're watching us right now. We'd love to get more people involved in this platform. We're also going to be joined by a very special guest. Her name is Nicole Gazey. She's going to talk to us about idea. And if you have no idea what idea is, then, well, you really should keep watching. Nicole's an incredible woman who I'd really like you to get to know. Now, before we get started, if you are watching online, first of all, thank you for being here. We appreciate that, and I'm sure Wilson appreciates that too. If you have any questions for Wilson or for Nicole, then please put them into the question box. We have our monitors keeping an eye on those, and we'll get to those questions right at the end. Please also note today's launch is being recorded, so if you'll be able to watch it anytime after this time, if you have indeed registered for today's webinar launch. Well, let's get underway. I think we need to get started by telling you a bit more about Wilson and talking more about changing the game. To tell you about Wilson Casado, Wilson is a firm believer that education and diversity are key to an innovative future. He's forever looking for opportunities where most aren't already looking. Wilson's a dad, a husband, an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Perth angel. He's passionate about sharing his own experiences to help others on their journey and has created Changing the Game for others to do the same. With a keen focus on diversity, education, and innovation, Wilson's determined to be part of a future we can all be proud of. That's a nice set of accolades, Wilson. Wilson, welcome.
Very nice words, Carmen. So thank you very much. So and thank everyone that's watching us.
Yeah, great to have you here today in this busy Perth boardroom of a beautiful Perth office, and also connecting with so many people around the world right now. Wilson, tell us, what does changing the game mean to you?
So the game is everything. The game is everything from the education you get, the professional experiences you have. It's life. That's what the game is. Changing the game for me is a platform for us to share the stories of people that have been challenging the status quo, people that have found adversity in their life, their own lives, but then somehow were able to change that and to have access to the game somehow. So we want to hear those stories so some people can relate to that, and eventually we're gonna help those people that today feel they don't have a chance.
So tell me, why are you so passionate about gender equality and gender equity in particular?
That comes back a bit in my own journey to reflect how things have been for me during my life. So in doing that reflection, I come back to the early ages, and as we're still in childhood and teenage times, and then getting into adulthood. So every time that I reflect to where I got the strengths to get out there and to do what we haven't been doing, my mind come back to my mom and my grandma. I think many of the skills and the traits that the strengths that I have in business and as a dad, as a husband, it came from then.
Mm.
What strikes me though is that I could see how frustrated they are in their own lives because they couldn't do what they wanted.
Mm.
They feel that society would expect that from them. So they would behave in a certain way and following a certain path. And I think that hold them back to be doing what they love.
Mm.
So I think that's just the times now are different. I think the whole conversation about gender equity, gender equality is part of our lives these days. So I still think many people don't feel uncomfortable and don't have access. So that's where my passion comes. So I would love to, young girls or women at all ages that still dreaming what they can do, they can relate to these stories and find their own way.
And what are your hopes at a greater level, even greater level than what you've already mentioned, for what will come after people see this series?
Well, the hope the hope is that our look is there is a big dream and there is you act here local and small. So I want to one person to be able to listen to these stories and somehow something trigger their own will to make a difference, to change the game for themselves. If we're able to impact one life, there will be enough. There will be great. There is a big dream that one become all.
Yeah.
But if I can positively influence one life, it will be awesome.
It'll be worthwhile.
Yes, definitely worthwhile.
Now, season one in particular focuses on women. You yourself, though, of course, have an interesting story of diversity, having come to a new country, started life here, and a business. Are you going to focus on different aspects of diversity in future seasons of Changing the Game?
So that's a good question. Look, the changing the game is actually focusing diversity, education, and innovation. Different aspects of how people can change the games for themselves. Obviously, I mentioned before when talk about diversity, gender diversity is particularly close to my heart. But I talk diversity in a bigger sort of perspective. Yes. Uh, so I started life in a middle low social class and somehow I was very lucky and fortunate and privileged to have access, to have good education, to have a loving mom and grandma that encouraged me the whole way. And that is a significant change. And immigration itself. One interesting thing, Carmen, is that doing the interviews that are already done so far. So it's incredible journey that makes you reflect and remind steps of your journey that you actually forget.
Yeah.
So it's just stored there in your memory, and then when we hear those stories, yeah, right, and then different perspectives. So that's fantastic. So yeah, no, coming back to your question, is diversity a general? So I'm also very passionate about exploring this. Australia welcomed me so well, so beautifully, and then I have been learning the story of the first Australians and the difficulty that they have to have access to the game. And I would love to have conversations about that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really like your reflections around being empowered when you start to look back on your own story by how that can actually impact those around you. So if you've never shared in a program or a platform setting like Changing the Game before, you know, it might be something to start thinking about, because we all have stories that can help other people.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And they're worth sharing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard you say diversity is good for business. What are some actions that business leaders who might be watching right now can actually implement to make a difference?
So look, today this is not new anymore. So we already have several examples out there that show that when we bring diversity to the table in a business setting, so it actually helps the team to perform better. To be inclusive and to give access is a step for today. So every business person, every decision maker should really reflect on that and bring along. I'm sure that in the business setting, sometimes we cut short of thinking, don't go in those self-reflections ourselves. If those decision makers really think about, their own journey and what was pivotal in their stories, they will see that diversity makes a big difference. So they need to start today and be inclusive.
Yeah, and there are measurable outcomes that come from having a diverse team, as you pointed out. Things that people do turn to care about are things like culture and the bottom line.
Yeah.
Can you say that there's evidence that diversity supports and improves those things?
So definitely. So I'm talking about the real impact in business outcomes.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the most only the non-tangible sort of outcomes of that. So a story that I heard that's very exemplary of that is that with that lack of diversity, companies that do their own product designs, do product designs with a non-diverse group on the tables, and let's say for that sake, white men-dominated sort of environment making decisions. So you're making decisions about products for children, products for elderly, products for women, when actually you don't have that diversity to test, whether those products are appropriate or not. That's a more very clear example. So if you want to touch on those markets and really be successful in those markets, it's just obvious that you need that diversity on the table.
Yeah.
That's just one example that we'll hold on that for as we don't have all the time of the world here now.
Yeah, for future seasons of Changing the Game. So where can we go to listen to and watch the latest episodes of Changing the Game?
So before I say where, so look, this has been for me individually a very interesting journey. I'm finding out more about myself. I'm getting myself out of the comfort zone. I do appreciate the people that already came and accept to be interviewed by me, because it's such a generous, just such a generosity from them to come and give the time and open up and be. I'm very humble and appreciative of that. We do have, we do have a Changing the Game YouTube channel. You can go there. We're already going to have few episodes live from now. We're launching today.
I've seen them. They look great. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. So, and also in your preferred podcast platform, there will also be a Changing the Game podcast available there. So you can just go to where you normally go to get your podcasts.
So in short, you're everywhere.
Oh, that's that's scary.
Don't be frightened by it.
Yeah.
That's the way to make an impact. It's certain.
That's what it is.
Yeah, you've definitely begun that process, Wilson. So that's very exciting. Congratulations on today's launch. I really do hope that after we're done here talking with our next guest and Wilson, that you do go and seek out Changing the Game on YouTube and on your preferred podcast platform. Wilson, thanks so much for taking us through that. I'd like you to stay here as I introduce our guest speaker, and we'll have a bit of a chat together about her idea You see what I did there? Yeah. Nicole Gazey is from IDEA. She's an advocate for innovative, personalised education that recognises young people's talents and empowers them to reach their potential. Thanks for joining us, Nicole. Nicole's experience as a mum of a creative child whose ability or potential was not reflective of his performance at school was the inspiration behind Innovation, Design, Entrepreneurship Academy, or IDEA. It's a really fantastic idea. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about it. And after witnessing the negative impacts his experience of school was having on her son's self-worth and the lack of opportunities available for him to build upon his innate skills and talents, Nicole searched for alternatives, revealed very little options, and so, like any resourceful woman, came up with a strategy herself. Nicole, thanks so much for being here for the launch.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really great to have you here. I'd love to hear more about your son, the story behind IDEA and why you decided to create this.
Yeah, I think it was not necessarily a decision. It was a moral obligation, I think. When you have a child, all the hopes and wonders of the world are there. And certainly, he was a very rambunctious little one. And time came for him to enter into education. I've always been quite interested in personalised education and student-centred education. So he did go into Montessori, and that was really great for him to explore. But even within the alternative education sphere, there is a level of standardisation. And so we noticed that over time, he wasn't necessarily meeting certain milestones along with the other students or engaging with the education program the way that that would be expected to. So it wasn't really overt. There were just some little signs there and a few little concerns, and just thinking maybe he just needs to have a good run on the oval or whatever. And but when the further up the education pathway he went, you could see that he wasn't actually fitting in. And I know that he wasn't alone. There's many parents like this, and it's a particularly problem for boys, I think. The system that gets them to sit down and get work done on a certain time at a certain time, and having standardized assessments, and they're really high risk actually assessments, because you get one shot at it, and if you don't pull through, then that has negative impact. So really, that was just my observation as a parent. And then obviously going shopping for high schools, what was out there. So went into the mainstream public system. The public system here is a really good system. But again, when you have thousands of students at a school, you can only do so much in terms of tailoring it. So I'm lucky enough to have a career in the education sector. And I think that at that time I was involved in a lot of projects looking at student transitions and how to prepare young people for the world beyond school, and how that connection lies. There's actually very few of us that operate at that intersect, where you have industry, training, higher education and school come together to have those conversations. I was just lucky enough to be at the table for that. So knowing where he needed to get to and what was on offer for him, the skills that he has and many other really creative, innovative young people. The problem is that the system is still kind of focusing on structures that are probably more relevant to a standardized system like the industrial era. So there's huge changes afoot. You can imagine 100-year-plus-old beast trying to change within a political environment is a big thing, and the system actually meets the needs of a lot of people. But really what the world is looking for, and the world of work is looking for, are a lot of the skills that these young people who are slipping through the cracks have got. So my experience of working in a school as well, and in that career guidance kind of role, and speaking to parents who also had that same petrified look on their face that I did when I was trying to look for options for my son, just think it was really hard to convince them that their child is actually going to be okay, but we didn't have anything to offer them while they're at school that could develop those skills. So with any talent, if you don't use it and you don't build upon it, you do actually lose it. So there's a lot of missed opportunities for young people like that. So where IDEA landed was me giving myself 4 years before my son got to senior secondary school to come up with an alternative that there are alternatives out there, but they're usually philosophically aligned. They're not for everybody, and they're costly. So not everybody has access to them. So using my background in education and my network and my experience as a mother, seeing firsthand the impact on young people and what I needed as a customer, I guess, of the system, started to put together the concept of IDEA. At that senior secondary end, year 11 and 12, my philosophy always is that year 11 and 12 are the first 2 years of your career, not the last 2 years of school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
So it's quite, there's a lot of strategic opportunities at that time to help young people to transition smoothly to that next step, instead of going, oh, you're finished, you've done your exam, see you later, good luck. So we thought about, developing IDEA, and the 2021 program is very much in that student support and family support space.
Yep.
While we obviously have a lot of young people who have either left the system or are being home educated, or they're independent learners, so they might be doing online learning, but they're missing that wraparound service of a school. So that's where we're focusing on at the moment. But the bigger vision is to have a full-time program.
Wow.
Where we obviously, it's all portfolio based, looking at the new way of credentialing and involving students in on the ground work experiences and internships with local businesses, and really embedding that education in the real world, because they're young adults. I don't know if you know any 16, 17-year-olds,
Sure
but
do.
they
got one at home.
Good. Okay, mine's 18. So you know full well that you cannot baby these people anymore.
No, they're adults.
Yes, they like to be babied at certain times when they want their washing done and things, but
Or
there's-
food cooked. Yeah.
yeah, there's a real opportunity there, isn't there? If you start to, I guess, wrap the education around them, but in the real world while they're doing stuff to prepare themselves. So brokering opportunities for them and setting them up with a network. And that's how we all make our way, isn't it? We have networks and everybody helps each other. And so that's kind of the story of where we, how we got to today, sitting in this seat. So,
Great story. Thank you for sharing it. And it is a good story, isn't it? And it's remarkable in particular because so many people watching right now will relate to that experience of sitting there and looking at the status quo and thinking there's a need here. I know how to address that need. And where they might be falling short right now is, okay, what do I do next? Who do I go to? Where do I get help? How do I actually make my idea, in your case, literally it was idea. How do I make this thing real? What's your advice to those people?
Oh, okay.
What
Just
did you
get used
do?
to not having much sleep is the first tip. 3 hours sleep is all I need now. No, I think that I've just been lucky, and I said before it's a bit of a moral obligation. The reason I say that is because I had the insight into the system, and I know how intricate it is, and I know how high risk it can be as well, and how politically sensitive education can be. I also understand the absolute commitment that our school leaders have and our teachers have, and our even, all the way up through the Department of Education, etc. Everybody wants the best for young people, just we're operating in this space. So I think that was a key thing, being within the system. But then it was obviously going out to families and seeing if I wasn't just the only one that thought there's this gap here. What if it looked like this? So a fair bit of market research. I'm talking a couple of years worth.
Yeah, right.
And that was just starting with informal conversations, and then having conversations with colleagues and families and students, etc. And then starting to float business is an integral part of this program. So going out into the business world. And to be honest, since connecting with the business world, I've realized that there is a wealth of generosity out there.
That's okay. I'll turn up the volume for you a little bit there. We're having a bit of trouble hearing you, Nicole.
That's
a bit of
a really
feedback.
odd
Thank
thing.
you.
That's
Thank you
nice.
very much. I know you're used to being heard nice and loud.
Yeah, I really am.
How's that? Do let us know. We're monitoring everything that's going on. So if you're having trouble hearing, just let us know. We've got a bit of background music from a noisy cafe next door. So we're trying to compete with that. And of course, we'll make sure in the recording you're able to hear everything you need to hear if you want to go back and watch any of this. So Nicole, you're talking about your market research process, going out to the people who you know that you need to help and getting feedback from them. And it took a couple of years. Did you do anything to formalize that strategy over and above having conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we engaged in accelerator programs to really kind of bed that down. And this has been, I've been on my own learning journey this whole time. Google has been my best friend and my business partner's best friend. We'll often Google something just before a meeting, get it in our head and then move in to the meeting with new intelligence.
Yeah.
So we're learning as well. But in terms of formalizing it, it was accelerator programs. We were fortunate enough to have been given introductions to people, and then we just had more and more conversations. So we have done statistical analysis of the market, etc., to kind of back up and validate what we think, our hypotheses of the market. And we're really also fortunate enough that there's a model very similar to it, but with a sports context, that has been highly successful in Australia, and they're having amazing outcomes with young people. So we've been able to observe some of their successes and how they've broken into the market as well.
Great. So another strategy of looking for a similar program, that you can kind of look to model and learn from, which is an excellent thing. Now, Wilson, I might bring you in here. Now, Nicole mentioned getting really great access to business and good response from business. As a person in business, what do you think when you hear about something like what Nicole's putting out into the market?
I think one of the business perspectives that we have is that we in our business always use our own business as an example. So we always after young people, talent, as a good-hearted, people to come and work with us. And one thing that we do find, and everybody complains about it, is that there's not enough people. The candidates are not there, and etc. So which is quite antagonic with that sort of, there is unemployment out there.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, well, there is not enough people to come and fill these jobs.
And yet our universities and schools are pumping out people. So where's the disconnect?
That's right. And I think there is a big part of this conversation is what Nicole is saying, which is not necessarily we're actually offering those young people the resources that they need and the sort of, we have been doing as we always did. It's a traditional education. If you pass through that sort of, stream, so you successful. And if you don't, you're not. You even have this kind of a fail brain to it.
Yeah.
We're losing talent over there. So as a business, so we are actually engaging in high school to be mentors, to give them a better flavor of what the real work environment is about.
Yeah.
So that's one little way for business, I think, to be involved with.
Yeah, I think there's 3.9 million students in Australia, and if you think one system is completely responsible for that, for developing their general capabilities, their foundational skills of literacy and numeracy, and now there's this, as the world changes so rapidly, there's this responsibility put on the system to really help young people with those work skills. And yet for a lot of people that have been in education, they went to school and they trained to go back to school and become teachers. So they're experts in their field, but that's where I really believe that a collaboration between industry, business, education, training, that's where the future lies, I think, with education, where it's not one system's responsibility anymore to develop a young person for life beyond school. It has to be that multi-systemic, multi-dimensional, I guess, approach to education. And so that's what we're starting to see hints of, but it will be slow. So I think things like IDEA or anything else like that is the immediate response and test case to be able to build upon what we learned there, to see larger scale policy change and system-wide solutions.
A little less of that set and forget kind of attitude to education. I've paid for this. That kid's right, or I'm right. I've paid for this education.
We've
no,
done
we're
our
going to take
best.
more of it on.
Yeah,
Absolutely. What a fantastic program you've got on your hands there, Nicole. You mentioned your 2021 program. Tell me, of the people who are coming through the program, what are some of the moments that made you say, wow, this is going to work? This is a great thing.
a funny thing, we didn't mean to have a 2021 program. It just came to us. So one example that was highly successful was a very, very capable young student who had gone through private education and in year 11 and 12 needed something more because he went to, you know, a very good school, but it just wasn't meeting his needs. He'd been a business person since he was 12, putting on dog shows, etc., and bringing in community members. He's just one of those types of students. Took himself off to another school that has a very good reputation for being highly innovative, but still wasn't enough. So he reached out to us to see if we had a full-time program, to which we said we didn't at that point in time, but I'd be happy to meet with him and his parents and just discuss where he's at and what he's thinking, and offer some advice on what he could be doing in his final 2 years of school. And I was talking to him and I was, you know, laying out the options. Maybe you just do this, and it's only 3 terms until the end of year 12. You could just make it through, and blah blah blah. Found out that he had a multinational company that he was operating outside of school. Just one of those people with huge amounts of talent. And as I was talking, I went, you know what? I think you're beyond school now. I think it's time to try and go to university, because you're doing what first years and even second years haven't done yet. So we went and knocked on the door of a great university in Perth, and got to speak to their admissions people and the School of Business, the Dean of Studies there. And I just wound him up basically and put his portfolio in front of him and pushed him in front of the audience, and he sold it. So he should be in year 12 this year, but he's actually in uni,
I love
first
that.
year uni.
What an extraordinary success story.
He's an under-engaged student. We're not just talking about disengaged. There's highly talented students out there who wasn't doing his ATAR because he didn't want to sit still in a class. But he's now sitting in university because of his portfolio of evidence and because of his connections and his experience.
And all respect to elite private schools, but they're commercial entities. And they're hardly going to turn someone away and say, look, you're done here. We don't need to put you through year 12. So just knowing there are other options on the table would be highly beneficial to families like these who are really dealing with, as you say, under engagement. You know, it's hard enough to send kids to school when they are engaged. I've just put a child through year 12. It's hard going. So to get someone to go along when they're feeling like there's nothing here for them anymore must be more than just an education battle. It's a life battle.
It is. And I think we need to listen to them as well. And we say that there's 12 years of school, but for some there's 10, and for some there's 11, and some there's 13, you know, so we need to listen and have that agility within the system. And I'm seeing evidence of it, but that's a really great example of someone who could have missed that opportunity. If we didn't intervene.
Nicole, really fantastic stories, an incredible product, great program. I can see Wilson beaming with pride at being able to use even the launch of this platform to give you a platform to share a story like that. I hope that when the time comes, you'll say yes to being interviewed by Wilson for changing the game. Because Nicole is changing the game. I think you're the embodiment of what this podcast and this platform and this show is all about. So a high five already there, Wilson. Nice work. Fantastic, really fantastic. Where do we find out more about IDEA?
So at the moment we've got a very startup version of our website. So there's probably enough information there, and you can subscribe for all of our updates because things are changing daily at the moment in our business. So
great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. There's certainly a lot of potential there, and I'm looking forward to that episode of Changing the Game. Wilson, how are you feeling? Changing the Game is launched.
Well, look, I couldn't be happier. So this is what the Changing the Game is about. So sometimes you have, I actually even confess that I have that sort of, changing the game with Wilson Casado. And believe it or not, I'm a shy introvert. People, everybody going to say, nah, you're not. But it's not about me at all. So I just a small conduit for these stories. And the launch gave that live here. That's great. So Nicole also have a co-founder, Rebecca, that we have been talking with. These such amazing people changing the game as we go, right? So you can't have a better example than that. So you should just mention that you'd have in your mind that, I have to go, now 10, 11, 12 university. Now that's a different story of changing the game. You're challenging the status quo. and sharing this story is what Changing the Game show is about.
And I love that reflection from each of you that you identify with being more of an introvert. I think that more people out there than we realise are actually introverted people. That's why I choose to be a broadcaster and spend most of my time engaging just with one person in my mind's eye through the camera and through the microphone. And that's an opportunity that you're both creating now to give people who are less inclined to seek out connection an opportunity and a platform to do that. So we've got two really fantastic stories within the launch of Changing the Game. So thank you for sharing it with us. Now it's time to turn over to your questions. If you're watching us as we launch Changing the Game right now, anywhere around the world, I'd love to hear what your questions are. We have Megan McNeil here monitoring your questions and has some ready for our panel to answer. Yeah, I think I guess you could just go ahead and read it out loud and we should be able to hear you if you use a big voice.
Okay, I've got Dr. Catherine Layton. Wilson, what do you think of the 50-50 gender diversity target set by many businesses? Do you think this is even possible and is it enough?
So I'll repeat the question while you think about your answer there. The 50-50 target set by gender diversity, is the target enough?
So that's a very interesting question. So funny enough, I was having a conversation about these quotas or targets yesterday. So I give you, Catherine, and everybody that's listening, thanks for the question, Catherine. So when I have conversations about gender diversity and gender equality, gender equity, so we have a chat about that beforehand as well. So for me, the quotas is part of that process to make things a little bit more level. I don't think a 50-50 quota is the answer for what we're going for. I think the answer is to have a system that's fair, that treats both men and women fair, that gives the opportunity, don't judge or exercise some sort of a prejudice based in the fact that in your gender, right? And that goes for all diversity, all other diversities as well. Is the 50-50 achievable? I think to be more balanced is definitely achievable. So we, in the industry that we operate is the maths industry, the engineering, maths and science. We do know that women is a lot underrepresented there. So, and our company, when we go after candidates to come and join us, the female candidates are not there in the traditional way to get to them. So we are exploring a whole lot of other things, and we're finding out that, the girls don't have enough role models to talk about their career in maths. The girls don't have a place where they can go and learn those skill sets which is safe for them. So as we create those conditions, we will come to that sort of level playing field and have a more balanced number of genders. I think the 50-50 is a tool, is a mechanism. It helps to accelerate the process in certain cases.
Yeah, fair enough. Any thoughts, Nicole?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of my own experience. You mentioned the co-founder of IDEA, Rebecca Loftus, and she at the moment is pregnant and has a little one as well. And we talk about how we want to also really change the game in the workforce that we have as IDEA grows, and how women, we have breaks in our career because we're child rearing, and there needs to be some thinking really around board membership and the way that the workforce and the work day and the work week is constructed, so that we don't have those gaps. Because I've certainly been in interviews where someone saw a gap and asked what I'd been doing during that time. And I know many other women that have been questioned on their break in employment. And so there needs to be some kind of recognition, some way that either we don't need to answer to it, or that there is value placed on that role that we take, and then offering men the exact same opportunity to be that primary carer so that women can go back to work which I know some companies are providing that opportunity, but it's still, when that does happen, you go, oh wow, your company gives paternal leave. That's great and so that shouldn't be a surprise, really.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great thoughts from both of you. Thank you very much. Any other questions, Megan?
I've got Wilson Casado. Thanks, Nicole. I'm particularly interested in issues regarding first employment for youth, and as such, your comment regarding future partnerships for internships. Is your organisation doing anything in this sphere yet?
Not yet, but the idea is that because they're in year 11 and 12, the concept of their portfolio is that we will broker partnerships for them. So essentially they've got personal assistants for 2 years. So they come to us and say, I'm interested in these fields, or I think I might be interested in, a range of fields. And our job is to actually go and get work placements for them, obviously prepare them to be prepared for that. But the business partnerships that we have some already, but they're going to be integral to this program.
Yeah, great.
So how those internships look will obviously be at the discretion of the businesses that we work with. So
fantastic. Yeah. I can imagine there may be a few leaders watching right now just frothing at the idea of getting some of these young minds into their business. So I guess reaching out to you through idea would be a good thing to do.
Yes, we do have a feature on our page to say if you'd like to partner with us, to click that button and get in touch.
Yeah, no, these are definitely the innovative businesses of our future too, that would be willing to get involved in this kind of thing. So fantastic. Any thoughts around those kinds of placements? Taking kids who are younger into that kind of working environment will have some inherent challenges. Does anything come to mind, or would you see that most businesses would approach it pretty enthusiastically?
I think what comes to mind is this. So we, in our company, we do have an internship program. This internship program is still the more traditional way of doing it, still going to universities and getting those sort of last year or second last year student to come and start their careers in our business. Right? So we talk a lot about what the effort to be able to make that, because that makes, the organization need to put resources into it, need to spend time into it. So sometimes it makes, the decision makers think whether this is the right or not place to put those resources. So when we look at the outcome, so every time that we go and spend enough time nurturing those young people to become our successors, I used to say that we want them to become better than us, because we're obsolete, we're getting old. So we need to, the younger ones to be better, not and to replace us. That's uncomfortable, but very,
it's a good goal to have, really.
Yeah. So going a little bit down, that sort of traditional model, engaging not university students, but engage with high school students, which is something that we're talking about doing with the girls in STEM programs that we're going to, high schools, to teach them, to maybe inspire them to follow the career, and having them coming to do internships with the companies. Will require the companies to put some resources into it, but I don't see any better application for resources than that.
Yeah, and knowing that, that 2 year or maybe year-long investment, or however long that placement might be, could lead to having those genuinely suitable applicants, when, as you mentioned, all too often you don't have suitable applicants.
And we always say if a young person goes to placement and doesn't like it, that's a success, because you've actually narrowed down a pathway. They're not missing opportunities. You're going and engaging in a degree that they're not interested in. So that try before you buy is really important. And the other thing to consider is that, we're talking about 16 to 18-year-olds. And I think with IDEA, with their vocational training, and the human-centered design project-based learning that we're emulating the world of work every day, I think it's important for programs like ours, really does prepare young people for that work environment, but also that students don't have to go on placement at a business. Businesses can come to IDEA or other education providers and say, here's our problem. can you guys just have a think tank and come up with a range of solutions for us? That's a work skill. We hold a board meeting. We do a human-centered design process with them, and take them through that. And that becomes a project for their English, maths, science, whatever it is. So that's the concept, is that business can come in as well as the students go out, and the students will not go out until they're prepared, obviously. It is that, I guess, reciprocal relationship that we want to start to model and show that young people don't have to necessarily be a burden, and when they come, they do add value because they've been prepared to add value.
Yeah, really fantastic. Any other questions?
We've got quite a few coming now.
Quite a few questions coming. Let's whip through them.
So we have Lauren. Congratulations, Wilson. Can you tell me, what do you do in your business to promote diversity?
So yes, there are a number of things that we're doing. So well, one very simple thing, very basic. So when we recruit people, so their backgrounds, the gender, that we have check and balances between the partners and the people doing the recruitment to make sure that those aspects that are not relevant for the job are not taken into consideration, right? It means treating every candidate fairly. So it seems, when I say that, it seems like, well, but isn't that what everybody should do and do it? So, is that anything different? Well, it is different. And if you do really, do a self-reflection on the bias and in particular the unconscious bias that you may have around, particularly when initially you're not diverse in your own team. So you're going to see that some decisions sometimes are not fair. Having said that, the process proved to be quite good. So what we're seeing is a balanced number of women in leadership. So, and we have questions about that sort of 50-50 balance. And we're seeing that in leadership in our organization. We're also seeing the diversity in the linguistic diverse or the background sort of diversity in business. So here in Western Australia, this is not new. So we do have lots of immigration is a big relevant factor in our society in Western Australia. And the last time that we counted, we had 17 different ethnical origin or different language in only 80 people. Another important thing there that's more specific for, maybe we have some people in the audience for that. There is some myths around international students and, whether they do have access to work in Western Australia or not. So that's a very, specific example of what we don't have that distinction. We don't make that distinction. A candidate could be an international student. It actually doesn't matter whether you're an international student or not. So you're being selected in other matters in skill set in what you study. So we welcome those international students. That make a huge difference in the workforce, make a big difference in the diversity that we have on the ground.
Well, let's not forget, many companies are, of course, global.
Full
Makes
stop.
sense.
So even as we have our story of being global, and that's another evidence of how we do it.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, we'll keep going through the questions.
And this is from Stefan. Hi, Nicole. IDEA is such an interesting concept of innovating the way of education. However, we all know that it's a challenging process to alter people's perception of how education should be. What are some of the strategies and actions IDEA is taking to position itself among other traditional education providers and encourage parents and students to make that change?
Yeah, it is really tough and kind of scary sometimes as well when you squeeze your way into the market and you're doing something a little bit different. And we've always said that we work alongside the system, not absolutely not to replace it, because it does work for many. So we've actually, our strategy was to go to the converted already, and that is the home education network. There's a growing population of that, and COVID accelerated the increase in the number of students who opted not to go back to school. And also there's students that are engaging in online learning through, there's a national school at the moment that does online learning So we call them independent learners, or they might be, part in training but want to engage in some other education. So that's where we've started, and we thought to change the system is really big, and it is happening. It's going to happen. The system will change. It's just going to take quite a long time to do that, just because of the very nature of legislation and things like that. So our concept is to just get on with it, and just start to model and experiment and play with how to utilize the current system and its strengths, but obviously personalizing it for a niche market of students. So once that occurs and there's trust and rapport and evidence as well, evidence that it operates, that's when we can start to work with the system to see what elements can be rolled out more, and to bring it to scale.
Yeah, fantastic. And doing things like today, just getting the word out there,
Yeah.
and just educating people on the value of this program is absolutely going to help.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions?
Yes.
We are flooded with questions.
Enzo is asking, Wilson and Nicole, in your opinion, primary schools have enough tools to inspire female students to pursue a career in STEM fields? How important is having female role models from different backgrounds for young children?
I think it's super important. And when you were talking about what you were going to be doing with your encouraging young women into STEM, I gave a talk probably about 2 years ago at a school for the maths department to all the girls. They had a girls in STEM evening with the mums and the aunties and the girls. And I was really amazed to hear that there were often the reason girls don't choose maths, high-level maths or high-level science, is because they're the only one in the room, and then there's boys. And so they actually need peers. So I think female mathematics and science teachers are your first go-to. They're the most accessible role models for those girls. But then for schools to do some work around, I think that, I went to an all-girls school. I can't say that it was the greatest experience, but I think there is something to be said about, gender-specific classes for particular subjects sometimes. And I guess that schools have to kind of consider the cohort they've got. And sometimes there may be a gender balance, but in those schools where they see that lack of gender balance, that buddying up young people, young girls, to enter into a classroom or to have a discrete classroom themselves would also be really helpful.
Bit of moral support.
Yeah,
like any form of learning, you're putting yourself out there. We've already talked about naturally introverted people.
Yeah.
And if a young woman happens to be introverted, you're hardly going to speak up in a classroom full of your peers who potentially might be viewed as someone who ridicule
or be
you.
the only girl in the classroom. So my mother, in fact, she's was the one of 2 women at university. She's a mathematician. She was one of 2 women, and she said that if she didn't have that other girl, she probably would have dropped out. So
wow, really incredible. Any thoughts around that one?
I do. So maybe a different perspective to it. So, look, my experience with more primary schooling kids, so it's very limited. So I have more practical life experience with my children and potentially cousins and not cousins, nephews. And,
yes.
I think I have been hearing quite frequently from these very young people that they don't like maths, and I think I think their parents tell them go and talk to Wilson, to Uncle Wilson, because he loves maths and etc. Which is true. So I'm quite biased there. But what I have been experienced with the young children I talk with about maths is that the perception of maths are completely different from mine, I guess. So what I try to give to them is that different perspective, what maths is for me and how that relate to life. And, it's not about, making the sum or the maths operation there. It's really about, what is that, why that's important for you, and that's how that impacts life. So I do have a very good a success rate of them coming out of that conversation and that's cool and etc. and going for their homework with much more appetite than they were in the beginning.
So that's storytelling within teaching, isn't it? Where there's another theme for today, I think, you know, the power of sharing story and relatable experience.
Yeah, so I think all of these are having the role models there as well. So I definitely think that will change the landscape and making more, you know, kids will be interested in those.
And young people engage when they see the reason why. So I think the introduction of more present female role models in maths and in STEM actually tells the story as to why. So you're here and you don't see it, you know, how it relates to you and the where you're going to go. But there's a lady there, a woman who's in that position, who's telling you, she's mapping back and saying, to get to where I am, to live this life, this is what you need to do at school. So I guess it's the connection between the workplace, the woman's experience, and then the pathway there. So it's making those pathways explicit that will help increase engagement.
All the more reason to amplify those voices in a platform such as Changing the Game. Any other questions for us?
I think we'll take two more.
We'll take two more and wrap it up. I agree. Let's do that.
So we've got Kevin from Business Growth. A great concept. For Nicole, a large percentage of young people end up doing apprenticeships but come out of these with no business skills or real life skills. Do you have a plan to engage with these industries, in particular trade businesses?
Yeah, I mean, the end point for our young people, we will help them obviously get there, but that's we are intending to co-design the program. So we believe that you know, it does take a village to educate a child as well as raise them. So because everything will be project based, if we have a young person who's interested in the trades, obviously working with their employer or their the business that they are, the industry that they're engaged in, to really see what we need to do back at on campus in their projects to help them really be prepared. But you're right, most tradies now end up as business owners, and those skills are not, I guess, explicit within the training, the trade training for those students.
Yeah, and there'd be a lot of other professions that mirror that same model, that you are a business as well as having learnt that expertise, whether it's in STEM or otherwise.
I mean, entrepreneurship is a great example, and there's a lot of entrepreneurship programs that they're usually for the middle school students and lower school students. As soon as you get to year 11 and 12, if things get serious, you've got to do exams and do your 45-minute classes and get through the curriculum. So that's, you know, obviously with the project-based approach that we have, we actually have the benefit of being able to embed entrepreneurship skills into whatever category or industry those young people want to go into.
Brilliant. All right, one last question.
So I'm going to combine two, because Gustav, Andrade and Anonymous have asked very similar questions around the future of IDEA. Anonymous is particularly interested in the direction of policy change, and are you going to step into that advocacy space for change? And Gustav is looking to know more about whether you're going to go national.
Yes. Yes. That is the big idea. The big idea is actually to model how we can use the current funding that's available and the structures that are in place, but do something just a little bit different, which is happening in small pockets around Australia, but to be able to provide you know, the research behind that. So you can understand when you're changing policy, you can't just do it on a whim. There needs to be strong evidence of efficacy for that change. And so I guess that's one of the roles that we will play. And advocacy is actually one of the three branches of IDEA. And that is us working with business industry and other agencies to really, universities as well, to really provide the evidence that's required for that. But was there another little bit to that question? National.
You're going national.
Oh, let's just work at this level first. But yes, obviously there is in the pipeline a dream for that. But
but we do still have state-based education.
We
I
have
guess you'll work within that paradigm for now. What a fascinating conversation. I think you'll agree, if you're watching on, that we've got two very interesting guests, which has been evidenced by the amount of questions you have asked. So thank you so much for watching and engaging with us so effectively. I hope that your next step is to go and check out the Changing the Game show. Find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Nicole, thank you for talking about IDEA. Great to have you here. And Wilson, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm just feeling thankful and grateful. So just having an audience present there and asking the questions and interest, have a guest like Nicole, that's, it's about these stories, not about me. So I'm awesome, loving it.
What a fantastic morning. I hope you have a fantastic day and enjoy the rest of your week. I'm Carmen Braidwood. Thank you so much for being with us.